Hello, and welcome to the College of DuPage Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance Area's presentation on the usage of commas. Please visit the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance area in the Learning Commons on campus. Schedule an appointment with one of our coaches, either in person or online, or check out other helpful videos posted on our website. The comma is a valuable, useful punctuation device because it separates the structural elements of sentences into manageable segments. Use commas to separate independent clauses when they are joined by any of these coordinating conjunctions: and, but, for, or, nor, so, or yet. For example, the game was over, comma, but the crowd refused to leave. The student explained her question, comma, yet the instructor didn't seem to understand. Yesterday was her brother's birthday, comma, so she took him out to dinner. Whenever you have independent clauses joined by one of these coordinating conjunctions, use a comma. Use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that come before the main clause. Common starter words for introductory clauses that should be followed by a comma include after, although, as, because, if, since, when, and while. For example, while I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. Because her alarm clock was broken, comma, she was late for class. If you are ill, comma, you ought to see a doctor. When the snow stops falling, comma, we'll shovel the driveway. However, don't put a comma after the main clause when a dependent or subordinate clause follows it, except for cases of extreme contrast. For example, the cat scratched at the door, comma, while I was eating. This is incorrect because the main clause is dependent upon the clause that follows it. So, no need for a comma after the word door. She was quite upset, comma, although she had won the Oscar. This comma use is correct because it is an example of extreme contrast. She was quite upset even though she had won the Oscar. Extreme difference, therefore, comma. Common introductory phrases that should be followed by a comma include participial and infinitive phrases, absolute phrases, non-essential appositive phrases, and long prepositional phrases, those with more than 4 words. For example, having finished the test, comma, he left the room. To get a seat, comma, you'd better come early. After the test but before lunch, comma, I went jogging. The sun radiating intense heat, comma, we sought shelter in the cafe. Common introductory words that should be followed by a comma include yes, however, and well. For example, well, comma, perhaps he meant no harm. Yes, comma, the package should arrive tomorrow morning. However, comma, you may not be satisfied with the results. Use a pair of commas in the middle of a sentence to set off clauses, phrases, and words that are not essential to the meaning of the sentence. Use one comma before to indicate the beginning of the pause, and one at the end to indicate the end of the pause. Here are some clues to help you decide whether the sentence element is essential or not. If you leave out the clause, phrase, or word, does the sentence still make sense? Does the clause, phrase, or word interrupt the flow of words in the original sentence? If you move the element to a different position in the sentence, does the sentence still make sense? If you answer yes to one or more of these questions, then the element in question is non-essential and should be set off with commas. Here are some example sentences with non-essential elements. That Tuesday, comma, which happens to be my birthday, comma, is the only day when I am available to meet. You could just say, that Tuesday is the only day when I am available to meet. Here is an example of a non-essential phrase. This restaurant has an exciting atmosphere. The food, comma, on the other hand, comma, is rather bland. You could just say, the food is rather bland. An example of a sentence with a non-essential word might be, I appreciate your hard work. In this case, comma, however, comma, you seem to have overexerted yourself. You could just say, in this case, you seem to have overexerted yourself. Do not use commas to set off essential elements of the sentence, such as clauses beginning with that, relative clauses. That clauses after nouns are always essential. That clauses following a verb expressing a mental action are always essential. Here are some examples of that clauses after nouns. The book that I borrowed from you is excellent. The apples that fell out of the basket are bruised. You see, no commas are needed in either of those sentences. Here are some examples of that clauses following a verb expressing mental action. She believes that she will be able to earn an A. He is dreaming that he can fly. I contend that it is wrong to mislead her. They wish that warm weather would finally arrive. Again, no commas are needed. Here are some examples of other essential elements where no commas are required. Students who cheat only harm themselves. The baby wearing a yellow jumpsuit is my niece. The candidate who has the least money lost the election. In the first sentence, if you remove the words who cheat, it becomes students only harm themselves, and that changes the meaning of the sentence. You need the words who cheat. They are essential elements of the sentence. In the same way, the second sentence, the baby wearing a yellow jumpsuit is my niece. Wearing a yellow jumpsuit is an essential element of the sentence. It distinguishes which baby is my niece. Here are some examples of non-essential elements where commas are required. Fred, who often cheats, is just harming himself. My niece, wearing a yellow jumpsuit, is playing in the living room. Apples, which are my favorite fruit, are the main ingredient in this recipe. Professor Benson, grinning from ear to ear, announced that the exam would be tomorrow. Tom, the captain of the team, was injured in the game. In the first example, who often cheats can be removed, and the sentence, Fred is just harming himself, still makes sense. In the second example, wearing a yellow jumpsuit is a non-essential extra little bit that describes my niece, but it's not essential to the meaning of the overall sentence. My niece is playing in the living room. That still makes sense. Use commas to separate three or more words, phrases, or clauses written in a series. For example, the Constitution establishes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. Use commas to separate the three different branches. The candidate promised to lower taxes, protect the environment, reduce crime, and end unemployment. Use commas to separate the various promises made by the candidate. In this example, commas are used to separate the different clauses in the sentence. The prosecutor argued that the defendant, who was at the scene of the crime, who had a strong revenge motive, and who had access to the murder weapon, was guilty of homicide. Use commas to separate two or more coordinate adjectives that describe the same noun. Be sure never to add an extra comma between the final adjective and the noun itself, or to use commas with non-coordinate adjectives. Coordinate adjectives are adjectives with equal or coordinate status in describing the noun. Neither adjective is subordinate to the other. You can decide if two adjectives in a row are coordinate by asking the following questions. Does the sentence make sense if the adjectives are written in reverse order? Does the sentence make sense if the adjectives are written with and between them? If you answered yes to these questions, then the adjectives are coordinate and should be separated by a comma. Here are some examples of coordinate and non-coordinate adjectives. He was a difficult, stubborn child. These are coordinate, because you could say he was a stubborn, difficult child. Or you could put the word and in between. He was a difficult and stubborn child. They lived in a white frame house. So you wouldn't say they lived in a frame white house. That doesn't make as much sense. And you also wouldn't say they lived in a white and frame house. So this is an example of non-coordinate adjectives. She often wore a gray wool shawl. Again, non-coordinate. Your cousin has an easy, happy smile. You need that comma after easy because these two adjectives are coordinate. You could say happy, easy smile, or you could say easy and happy smile. Use the comma at the end of a sentence to separate contrasted coordinate elements or to indicate a distinct pause or shift. Here are some examples. He was merely ignorant, comma, not stupid. The chimpanzee seemed reflective, comma, almost human. You're one of the senator's close friends, comma, aren't you? The speaker seemed innocent, comma, even gullible. Also use commas to set off phrases at the end of the sentence that refer to the beginning or middle of the sentence. Such phrases are free modifiers that can be placed anywhere in the sentence without causing confusion. If the placement of the modifier causes confusion, then it is not free and must remain bound to the word it modifies. For example, Nancy waved enthusiastically at the docking ship, laughing joyously. This is correct with the comma after ship. Lisa waved at Nancy, laughing joyously. This is incorrect. You don't need that comma there. We don't know who is laughing, Lisa or Nancy. Laughing joyously, Lisa waved at Nancy. Now this is correct because now we know that laughing joyously is describing Lisa. Lisa waved at Nancy, who was laughing joyously. This is also correct because now we know that who was laughing joyously is describing Nancy. Use commas to set off all geographical names, items and dates, except for month and day, addresses, except for the street number and name, and titles and names. For example, Birmingham, Alabama gets its name from Birmingham, England. Note where the commas are between the geographical names. July 22nd, 1959 was a momentous day in his life. Use the commas to set off the numbers in the dates. Who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C.? Set off the different geographical parts of the address, after Avenue and after Washington. Rachel B. Lake, comma, M.D., comma, will be the principal speaker. Set off that title in Rachel's name. However, when you use the month and the year, no comma is necessary after the month or the year. For example, the average temperatures for July 1998 are the highest on record for that month. No comma required in that sentence. Use a comma to shift between the main discourse and a quotation. For example, John said without emotion, comma, I'll see you tomorrow. I was able, comma, she answered, comma, to complete the assignment. In that case, the main discourse is set off in the middle of the quotation. In 1848, comma, Marx wrote, comma, workers of the world, comma, unite. Here we have a lot of commas in use, and for different reasons we've already gone over, showing that the comma is very useful and helpful. Use commas wherever necessary to prevent possible confusion or misreading. For example, to George, comma, Harrison had been a sort of idol. Without the comma, it would seem like George and Harrison go together. The comma alleviates that confusion. I hope that this has been a helpful overview of comma rules and use. For more information about commas, visit the Purdue Online Writing Lab, or OWL, where the material from this presentation was sourced. Also visit the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance area at the College of DuPage Learning Commons. Thank you.